Good morning, good afternoon, and for some of you, good evening, everyone. And welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. I am your host, Jason Miles. And if you are new to the program and you haven't done it already, please hit the like, please hit subscribe, please hit the bell, as it does help us out tremendously. And for those of you that are already subscribers, thank you for being part of the engine that keeps the TIR machine going. Also, remember, we're constantly adding new programming and new shows to the channel, so it's really important to hit that bell so you're alerted whenever we go live or launch something new. Monday, we are doing our second sports show episode. It will be a post Super Bowl episode, so I'm excited for that. One of the hosts of that show is on here today. Also, I was on the David Feldman show, again, his office hours, I believe it's called. And we had a good discussion about what we're going to be talking about today, solidarity. So let me bring in, without any further ado, my homie, my co-host, my dog. He is the man, the Mau Mau Hour. He is the Pascal.
Peace and greetings to the chat. Peace and greetings to the audience. Peace and greetings, Jason Miles. Jason Miles.
Do you know the album cover that this is behind me, Pascal?
I have no idea.
Okay. That's the trivia question for today. Does anyone know the album cover that is behind me? If you do, you are an official OG. And let's bring in the man, the myth, the legend. He was once the voice of Black America in Maine. Now he's just one of many nignogs in Virginia. He is Marcus of the Left Flank Vets.
My voice is now overshadowed by James Clyburn. I haven't been able to really speak and influence public societies as much as I used to. But thank you. And Houday, all right. I got to throw out some Ohio
love. That's right. That's kind of a hometown thing for you, even though that is extremely far south of you. People forget how far south Cincinnati is. They even talk different from the rest of the state of Ohio. Would you agree?
Yeah, and basically too is you go east of Cincinnati is a portion of that we call Pennsyltucky, where that's not technically Ohio.
I've made the wrong turn and crossed that bridge and ended up in Covington, Kentucky.
Yeah, which the Mothman prophecies. So yes. It's like a bridge, yeah.
It's over there in West Virginia, which is also next to the Natty, as shitty Jim Rome would say. Yes, Dusty is correct. This is the Flipper logo.
Not familiar with Flipper the band at all.
Flipper is a pretty interesting band. They have a song called Sex Bomb. If I wasn't afraid of a copyright strike, I would definitely play it before the show, and it would be a lot of fun, and we'd laugh a lot. So, special guest from across the pond. Speaking of solidarity, this young person exemplifies solidarity. You may know him as the freedom fighter, the legend, luxurious hair. He is Thor Guevara. Thor Guevara.
We're going to talk about it, but I don't think I was doing solidarity when I was in Syria. I think I was way too deep in it to be in solidarity with anyone. I think I was just fucking in there, you know.
I'm always blown away sometimes. Even when we chat, sometimes talking, I'm like, that cat really did that.
I think the same. I'm like, damn, fuck, that's crazy.
Is that why you just sit your ass down now in Wales? Like, let me just sit my ass down.
Oh yeah, I think that's shit when I came back.
What's wrong, Pascal? Stop Facebook fighting. Stop.
I'm not on Facebook. My hands are right here. I'm looking.
Remember, we can see your
That's me,
screen
that's
through your
me.
freaking glasses.
I'm looking at.
Do not
We
spray.
can see the Meta logo.
Stefan, mate.
Which,
Go on, mate.
speaking of
I'm very
Facebook,
excited to hear your British accent more. That's why, come on, Pascal.
Gene loves my British accent. He thinks it's quite humorous.
Bloody hell.
I like the more fucking what was it, Cockney fucking. Oi, bruv, oi, God, like I want more aggressive shit. I
Look,
don't
give
want
me your phone.
yeah, posh
Look,
shit.
give me your phone before I wet you up.
Yeah,
You want a football hooligan?
yes.
Oh, I found this fucked up. I've been falling down this rabbit hole of like fight shit on YouTube,
Okay.
which is way cooler to watch to me than like podcasters beef. But there's some British shit. It's like hooligans bare knuckle fighting
Fucking hell.
in like parking lots. But it looks like they try to like organize that shit. I'm like, oh
Did you just find World Star?
no, it's not worlds. It's not like bitch and you ain't. And then somebody gets punched. Like I've been watching that shit in real life and on the internet for a long time. A long time. This was more like actual.
Kimbo Slice.
There's a fighting league where people are kind of like tied together. There's not the slap shit, and they just beat the shit out of each other. Have you seen that?
We had that in Miami, bro. It's basically, it's just a neighborhood organized street fighting.
Yeah.
Well, you had that dude Kimbo Slice that was doing
Kimbo
it.
Slice is from my neighborhood.
May you rest
He's
in peace.
dead.
He's dead. Yeah,
Your
right?
alter ego.
No, I wouldn't know.
You've never seen Pascal and Kimbo in the same room. Just say it.
You never
I'm
seen
not.
Pascal.
I'm not messing with Kimbo Slice. Kimbo Slice used to jack dudes up. For real, for real.
I've
Yeah.
never seen any of you in a room. You could be anyone.
What is the
I've never met any of you.
We could be I've never met any of you. You could be anyone.
Yeah. True.
Spoken like a true man who defied all intelligence prerogatives to go fight in Syria.
Damn.
The idea that Pascal is really Kimbo Slice, it needs to be something that we just try to get as an internet rumor.
Yeah.
I mean-
I'll just start photoshopping some dreads onto him.
Kimbo was nice with the hands. I mean, I definitely like the boxing game was tight. I'm not gonna lie.
When he tried to go professional,
The MMA was not a good one.
no. Because and the thing is too is like your prime was in the backyard. You
Yep.
know? And
There's a lot of difference between like real street fighting and then sanctioned fighting, because there's rules in sanctioned fighting that there aren't in street fighting. So you kind of have to, if that's the only way you know how to fight, you have to really rethink the way you fight. It is very, very different. And that's what kind of got me down that rabbit hole was watching these videos kind of debunking the myth of the Gracies as being they're great fighters, but the way they kind of almost design the UFC to showcase what they do and not really show flaws in their game by not having other fighters that could kind of showcase where their fighting style had flaws. I found that really interesting, and that just sent me down this rabbit hole of a bunch of other tomfoolery.
Watching men in parking lots.
Fucking just beating the dog shit out of each other.
appreciate
Anytime I can watch like fucking poor white people beating the shit out of each other, I'm like, oh man, unity.
So racial, man.
yeah.
Terrible.
And I appreciate Doc in the chat saying Kimbo did beat Ken Shamrock. And I'm like, he beat Joe Lewis's ass. You know,
How
but
old was Ken Shamrock during that fight?
he was 138.
Ken Shamrock didn't have any knees.
Y'all really follow that MMA real close, I see over here.
Oh man, it was.
I
I mean, yeah.
I like boxing, but the MMA, that stuff was too violent, man. I couldn't get with it. I was like, yo,
It's too
that's getting a hand up against the fence. I was like, yo.
I remember watching the Holyfield getting his ear bit off by Mike Tyson.
You remember that? Oh, I remember that.
My mom's cousin was getting married that day. I was in the wedding. I was with a whole bunch of grown motherfuckers who I didn't know. And when that shit happened, they went fucking wild.
Yeah, because it was the craziest shit you've ever seen.
I remember that.
What year was this? I don't know if I
It was in the
remember.
90s.
94?
94, 95,
I
something
don't
like
remember
that.
that. Impossible.
You weren't born?
I was born in 95.
You were born the year I graduated
You were
high
born in
school?
God damn.
You won in 1995?
It's been 84 years.
You, Jesus Christ, have your balls dropped?
I mean, the big guest that was just on Diet Soap was born 1997.
Oh my God, this is my daughter's age.
So that means there are people who are considering themselves adults who don't remember 9/11.
Oh, I don't remember 9/11, yeah, but I'm British, so.
Much to remember. We're canceled.
Oh, shit.
He didn't even forget 9/11. He never knew. What the fuck?
Someone says Jason loses it when he learns what time is. I hella do. Because when people say this shit like, hey, 2000 was 20 years ago, I'm like, oh, dude.
22 years ago. I have a friend
I
of
know
mine.
he's lost track of time. He'll be our guest. He's still not on the show.
He's like, yo, dude, can we get the guest here? He probably left to go do another show.
Just pops the earbuds in, starts cleaning the house.
It took 15 minutes.
This new podcast is pretty interesting.
He probably broke out and wanted to do another show, man. He was like, these guys are just.
Well, often on this show, we discuss the importance of solidarity, working along cross-racial, cross-cultural lines as a tactic to counter capital's hegemonic power. Sometimes it does feel that this new burgeoning left is a bit disconnected from the concept of power. Ideological posturing and at times sectarian squabbles aren't just counterproductive, they can be the death knell of a movement. From the book Marginalized Majority, the marginalized are now the majority, but our narratives around power haven't kept up. As long as we continue to operate within the structures of outdated narratives, we sacrifice our ability to recognize the reality of our power, our ability to produce reality, to live in the world we want and need. So today we bring in our guest, Sudip Bhattacharya, to talk about his latest essay in Counterpunch, Striving for Solidarity. Sudip serves as a co-chair of the Political Education Committee at Central Jersey DSA and is a writer based in New Jersey, having been published in Current Affairs, Cosmonaut, New Politics, Reappropriate, and the Aerogram, among other outlets. Prior to pursuing a PhD in political science at Rutgers, he had worked full-time as a reporter across the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. Please welcome our guest, Sudip. I got it right one time, and I was like, I'm gonna fuck it up tonight.
It is it's funny because the first time you said it before the show was correct. It's Bhattacharya.
So easy. What's wrong?
No, it's a game
I know.
too.
It's
Why don't you fucking introduce people? Whenever I ask you guys to introduce people, everybody go, oh.
Co-host, host, co-host, host.
See? And then we go. The show about solidarity. Look at that.
Sudip, I want to ask you: are you still in your political science program? Did you complete it, or you're?
No, I'm in the dissertation phase, so I'm actually in the phase where I'm doing a lot of the interviews now. So I have at least another year to go.
We had a guest who you probably taken a class with, who teaches at Rutgers.
Professor Floyd.
Yes.
Yeah, they're on my committee.
That's right.
They're on my committee. They're one of my readers. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it a while ago because I saw her on there, and I was like at that time cleaning and stuff, and then I was like, wait, is that Professor Alexander? And I just like, yeah, it was a really great conversation. But yeah, she's on my committee.
Oh,
great
dope.
great
Small world.
intellectual scholar, and
Mhm.
Was that just a moment of solidarity right there?
Right there. A small world. I
she's
do want to
great.
ask you, let me get this first question out of the way so we can get on with the show.
Sure.
And Stefan keeps reminding me. Sudip, thank you for agreeing to come on last minute. Really appreciate that. Really enjoyed your piece. You mentioned our very own Pascal Robert in your essay. Thank you for that.
thank you for the citation.
Now, your work in organizing, tell us a bit about the importance of solidarity in your work with the DSA.
Yeah. So it's a little complicated, but the way I was viewing solidarity is something I have seen in some of the work we've done at DSA and also at my own union, the AFT at Rutgers. There's two levels to it. Obviously, there's a first level of you just need it, even if your concerns are pretty particular to what you want. And then there's the other concern that I try to expand on in the piece, which is this idea of understanding solidarity as a common political destiny. And it's just something I've seen in our chapter in Central Jersey, where, I consider myself an organizer, but mostly as an activist. I've just followed the lead of other people's in our chapter, to be really honest. And solidarity is when you knock on doors, you talk to different people, you try to merge interests, but also bring people along, again, for that political destiny. Because at the end of the day, I'm sure we'll get into it later, you still need that long-term political vision of what society should look like. Our Central Jersey chapter has been led by some really, really amazing people I've learned from. And they've practiced that often. It's been a little bit harder over the last couple of years just with COVID and stuff, right? There's a lot of burnout. Frankly, solidarity, and that's what I mentioned in the piece at the end, where I ask questions like, how do we reimagine this kind of thing, considering some people's legitimate fears of wanting to just knock on people's doors or going into buildings, or other people living in those areas who don't want to deal with any of that, considering all the other pressures. But just broadly, this is something that's been in my mind since I've been in the chapter, and also previously when I was doing more of my organizing in my union.
Do you think that in the current moment that we're facing today, that notions such as solidarity, camaraderie behavior are being complicated by the particular identitarian posture that some elements of the left or liberals take towards challenging hegemonic forces? Notice I didn't say challenging capitalism. I said challenging hegemonic forces. I.e., do you think things like the intersectionality, the quote-unquote sensitivity to pronouns, the quote-unquote importance of gendering membership in certain organizations or speaking places, frankly, in the age in which wokeness is being deemed a pejorative for whatever reasons, that these things are actually becoming antagonistic to forming solidarity?
I do think so. Like what I said in the piece, I do think there's like a lot of competing forces, right, to actually building solidarity. There's the short-term interest that people overall have, which is like, paying your rent, making sure that, whatever little you have right now, you can keep, even if socialism at the bare minimum, even if socialism long-term is going to give you a lot more, short-term interests can be prioritized just because, how are you going to think about socialism if you're going to be houseless or homeless, right? So I think that's one interest. And I think what you're talking about, I don't generally think it's a problem of like quote unquote identitarian, all types of identitarian politics. I think there is maybe like you said, liberal or even sometimes conservative, or rather identitarian politics that doesn't really critique capitalism, that can be an issue, right? I think that's where I see the issue, because again, like I've seen from my own organizing and from just talking to people, and also as a person of color, like for example, after 9/11, as a South Asian American, a lot of my first relationship to very explicit forms of oppression was based on, Islamophobia. I'm not Muslim, but that doesn't really matter, right? People were very, very awful. And this is me in Jersey and Queens, where it's very diverse, but like, I guess a diverse array of people being awful. But that was my first instance. But I was lucky enough to find people along the way, including teachers and organizers, who then took that experience and put me on the pathway to having a broader critique. So that's like a form of identitarianism that I think people actually do have a connection to. Like, like that's something I feel is not necessarily have to compete with a socialist vision. But I think there is a kind of identitarian politics that is like what you've mentioned on the show multiple times, which is, Democratic Party politics, obviously, a kind of NGO politics where it's like, you elect someone who looks like you or claims to know you into power on a Democratic ticket, at least also. And then you don't have to think so much about what they're doing after. Or like local institutions, like religious institutions, or, preaching, prosperity gospel, or even different mosque or temple, very much like, for some understandable reasons, like feeling like you want to prove yourself that you're not the outsider, but still like having events with law enforcement, as a community. Like there's a lot of competing interests that way. And that's the kind of identitarian kind of thing that's never really going to set you up for a more broader radical critique that's needed. That's not just moral, but needed. So that's the way I view it. So yeah, I think pronouns are necessary to build community with people who have felt excluded. But certainly if it like delves into the kind of identitarian kind of politics where there's no class critique, that's where it can be an issue.
Any of you guys have a follow-up? Or may I proceed?
No, please go on.
So one of the things, and by the way, I really appreciated your article. I did read it. And I also read the other one you suggested, is that, talking about solidarity, I think is a very good idealistic concept ideologically. And I think that we definitely have examples throughout left history in America where attempts at solidarity were made. I think in the 30s and the 40s, there were attempts that were broached by working class people to form multiracial coalitions, even going back to some elements of the 19th century. Oftentimes, for narrow chauvinist and racialized reasons, those actual coalitions fell apart. Actually, more often than not, it wasn't even simply because of racially chauvinistic reasons. It was because forces of capital and power infused racial narratives into solidaristic movements intentionally to neutralize their efficacy and their ability to function. So that being said, right, understanding that we are going to need multiple identities, races, genders, orientations to get people to produce an agenda to challenge capital and the state's ability to create a public goods governance. Is it not logical that the first stage perhaps isn't solidarity, but politically educating people as to what is wrong with capitalism in the first place? Because frankly, I think one of the assumptions that we make on the left, which is problematic, is that people who we are talking to even find capitalism as a problem.
Do you want me to answer that, or is that good?
I definitely want you to answer that.
Oh,
Go for it.
Yeah, like I definitely think there is a, like what you're kind of alluding to. Like again, I see this thing just like you guys talk about, a very like capitalism doesn't have to be necessary. Like the weight of capitalism doesn't have to be just like a capitalist brainwashing people or telling them what's going on, right? There's a lot of ways that capitalism can work, even against some interests of different like capitalists themselves are crazy. Like there's, they do things that are very contradictory to even their own interests. And that's why there's such a need on, like the free market thing is just a lie. Like there's always going to be a need for government and things to like prop them up. Like as we saw in COVID, I mean, things were pretty messed up, and then an infusion of capital and such and all these different things. I think it's a little bit of both, right? I do think, because in my mind, it is necessary for people to have polit. This is something that obviously other groups have done in the past. The Black Panther Party has done that. The communists organizing in Jim Crow South did that. There's like, the famous book by Robin Kelly talking about Alabama communists. One of the major things they did was have, reading groups or reading out like stuff from the communist paper, right? So there's no romantic, like, again, it's not like people are ignorant or just being, led. It's just that there's a lack of things. Like there's a lack of this kind of rhetoric or understanding of stuff. But the thing is, I feel like they still have to work in tandem, right? Like, so if you have organizing, in my opinion, that's, obviously this is something that a lot of groups do, organizing on different kind of interests and needs, like making sure that the rent increases are not actually, like making sure rent increases are not happening in a building, right? You still need Paul Ed there, but I think of them as tandem, because if you have Paul Ed first or only, it can come off as like just another thing someone has to attend. Like it just seems like, what's the point? Like, I'll be real, like there's plenty of people, friends of mine, who I've had conversations along the way who have also changed their opinion because I've talked to them, but also because they've been also affected by certain things, right? And there's a lot of people I don't know personally, but I've knocked on doors before, talked to people where I can't really envision saying to them, hey, come to this Paul Ed first, and then we can really deal with your issue. And then it can be inverse either. I think the issue is also thinking that working class people are just gonna like rise up on their own without that help, because then I know I'm talking about, but it's like a weird loop that itself is very weirdly anti-worker, because if you look around, that's not happening in 10. So what does that mean? If you have that view that working people are just going to organically come together, then you are led to think they're just brainwashed, rather than saying they need both. Organizing on certain interests parallel to having these conversations and Paul Ed discussions about neoliberalism, American federalist politics, how that matters, and also like how to access things you need from your local government, right? And these are things like, as a Paul Ed person, I've also had to learn along the way. So I'm not suggesting that I've done these things yet. There's like been a lot of like changes along the way, but that's something where I've landed, where it has to be parallel to each other, or otherwise it's either going to be very paternalistic, or it's also going to be very delusional in some sense. Like, oh, they're just all I have to do is go outside, scream out socialism, and then someone's going to pop their head up, while, putting down packages and being like, oh, I was waiting for that. And it's rushing. Like, that's not going to happen either. But also telling someone join our meeting so we can learn, it's not going to work. Like, I wouldn't do that either if I was in DSA. And I come from a left family. It just sounds really boring or annoying, actually, to want to do that on your day off, or the 2 hours you have between making dinner and then going to bed again.
And as far as something in your piece that you hit on too, and that it's kind of evident when we talk about like the 50-year counter-revolutionary that has come off the backs of these like left organizing, and something that you hit on that I was actually just speaking about with a friend is the ability to do any type of clandestine efforts, within the United States. And it's like looking at the state structure. I mean, the CIA just came out saying that they're just watching everybody. There's no FOIA. They don't care. Which, like, I feel like most people are just like shrug. Well, like, yeah, I suspected. And so there's really no.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do most people feel kind of like, I don't care that the CIA is watching us?
I mean, I didn't see like the only reaction I saw from that CIA story, right? Is from the people who I'd expect to react for it. They're like, there's no broad, like. There's like no.
Say it again, Stefan. Did you say something, Stefan?
I think you have to be like a severely ideologically like committed liberal to not think the CIA was already spying on people. So I think people are bothered by it, but it's just something that everyone's already taken into account. Yeah. I don't think anyone likes being spied on, but it's something that's already been cashed in,
I'm pretty sure they have a file on me. I mean, they'd be remiss if they didn't.
Would you be hurt if they didn't have a file on you?
I wouldn't be hurt. I'd be pretty
Someone's
shocked.
like, where is the Robert file? I'm like, Robert? Who the hell is Robert?
But Sudip, I did actually want to just ask, like, can you expand on that idea, on like where you think organizing should go, and even in the, like really juxtaposing the security state that we have now.
Yeah, I mean, to be really honest, I don't know to some degree. Like I'm not a super expert on like how to navigate the security state really that well. If I did, I'm not saying I would like, certainly I would be saying that a lot more, but what I can say in terms of like how to actually organize in a certain kind of space that we're in with COVID, with neoliberalism on hyperdrive, with, like you said, I would describe it more as like indifference or apathy in a sense. Like what you said earlier too, Stefan, is like, yeah, like my dad, when I talk about certain issues during Bush and a little bit during Obama, like he would always be like, no, it's okay. Let's just let's just meet in person and talk more. And like even basic stuff, it wasn't super radical. Yeah, so I totally am like, that's a thing that I've seen anecdotally from pretty much like everybody I know, certainly among folks of color who I'm friends with, and among some white folks too on the left. Like it's just something that's there. And even folks who are not lefties, but just like I have friends who are liberal in the sense that they think liberalism is left, like just typically, other than our little bubbles that we're in. It's not, yeah, I talked to a friend like, oh yeah, you're a liberal. I'm like, all right, I'll take that. It's fine. I mean, I know what he thinks, but I'm sorry.
It's not a pejorative to them. That's relatively a new phenomenon.
Yeah.
Of hearing the word liberal as a pejorative, and it's kind of more of an online thing than anything else.
There's an intellectual foundation for that. I mean, going back to Lenin, I mean, there's actual like beware of liberals goes back pretty long in the intellectual history of the left. Yeah,
no, I'm not denying that, but I definitely feel like there are friends of mine who are liberal, who are really maybe left even, who don't always are not in DSA, but certainly have had that same kind of indifference or apathy. And so to organize against that, I think I mean, to be honest, the answers are still simple. Like even if there is a CIA watching us, like the answer is still simple. Like, going underground is not going to help. Never did, right? Like that's one of the issues that happened. I think Pascal, you mentioned, like the new left sometimes, like at the end of that experiment with different groups, right? Like they kind of retreated into clandestine or like into like, underground fighting. And I'm not going to like critique too much. Like there's like lots of like just repression pushing people back to like having no choice.
Hold on. Can we explain the context a little bit of like what happened with the new left, and as COINTELPRO infiltration started to sink in and people became more aware of that?
Yeah.
What is the drawback of that? And can you give us a brief history on something like the Weather Underground?
Yeah, I mean, so just broadly, I think, there was certainly a lot of repression that was happening. Obviously, there was interventions with like sending in undercover agents into parties like the Black Panther Party, intentionally creating those kind of tensions. But then there was and then we're talking about labor unions themselves and this kind of disconnect between the left and some labor groups because there's the Vietnam War. But ultimately, there were also actions taken, like losing a little bit of the connection to a constituency, being armed when maybe there wasn't necessarily that constituency anymore. And then the Weather Underground, like you're saying, kind of like having these terroristic acts. And to what Pascal said about Lenin with liberals, that's also something Lenin critiqued a while ago, right? Like one of his things is he was very much worried about some tendencies, I guess, among anarchists or other groups to just view that as the core thing to do, which can be the problem, right? It's not like you don't have a right to defend yourself, but it's a problem when that's the only kind of way that people interact with what's seen as the radical left. And it's a lot of terrorism, and it doesn't really help to generate the constituency that's needed. So to Marcus's question about what is needed now, I think it's still fairly simple in that sense. Like it is about certainly protecting ourselves against these state forces, but also organizing. Like it's still having these groups at a national level coordinating with each other too. So it doesn't, I think one of the issues I referenced in one of my articles is like after the uprisings and the unrest, like that's a good example. The unrest was necessary, right? Like that for a moment did push people in power, especially even liberals or neoliberals, to concede that whoa, like something's going on. So I'm not that's necessary. Anyone who was like sitting on the sideline and just saying like, oh, they just did this right or did that, it's just, even people on the left or like that's also a wrong reading of history. Like literally the burning down of Minneapolis police station was pretty big, right? No one should discount the fact that there was even polling at the time showing a little bit of like understanding of why. And that effort should not be seen as somehow counterproductive. It only became an issue when there wasn't necessarily like, Jody Dean's a political theorist. She talks about this. She says like the crowd needs endurance when there isn't institutions, maybe helping with the unrest in some way, like disruptive actions, but doing it in a more consistent level, coordinated level, just like our enemies do. I mean, they coordinate, right? It's not like the police are just like miraculously coming to the same solution in different cities and towns. It's like they coordinate. Like, hey, man, we're gonna go into this Standing Rock thing together. Or they have ALEC, right? Like the group that basically puts together various corporations with their right-wing beneficiaries to do statewide legislation at the same time. So I'm just saying it's easy, but not because we're the left. We don't have the money. I think that's the weakness too. And also, to be honest, what we're trying to do is so much more difficult. Like that's the other thing we have to be honest about, is our vision is something that's much more daring, and it's going to ask for more risks at some level than someone who's doing the other approach, which is like, hey, donate to ALEC, stand your ground laws, or something ridiculous, right? So I think that's a difference too.
It really too, even like
Communist Party.
But say again, Stefan.
Sounds like we need a Communist Party.
Communist Party USA. No. I think. Part of did I just lose it? Part of the issue that you're kind of bringing up is, and then something that Jason, you've hit up before, is that like some people on the left don't want to be popular, right? They have steep their identity in being counterculture, and that is like the left is that's something that you can get into, but like finding out ways to actually like popularize and acting as if this should be the popular narrative. But yeah, and like you're going to you talk about Sudip, it's almost like the river is going one way, so like a lot of these groups, the Federalist Society, they don't need to call ALEC and say, where are we going today? What's the move today? This is where the river goes. There, all of these things work almost seamlessly, but that's where on the left it's like, no, we have to take some effort to not only get solidarity with other left organizations, but then how do we make that international, and how do we bring that message to the people? And it just takes literally hard fucking work, going outside, knocking on a door, picking up a phone, sending an email, answering an email. You want to
continue, Marcus? I don't want to.
Oh no, I'm good.
There's some really important commentary that's being shared here that I think that we really have to address kind of head on and not really skirt around. But we're talking about the new left of the 60s, the contemporary moment, and how we proceed forward. One of the things that I think that everyone knows, that our motto on this show is to try to have kind of non-sectarian leftism, right? And and Jason can disagree with me. I would respect if he did. I think one of our motivations for why we take the non-sectarian posture comes out of the belief that it is absurd to wear a leftist ideological fraternity t-shirt in an era where literally people don't even understand what challenging capitalism in any way means after capitalist realism for over 50 years. So walking around saying that I'm a Marxist-Leninist, I'm a SOCDEM, I'm a Trot, I'm an anarchist,
I'm a patriotic socialist.
Yeah, it's pretty stupid. And I think that Jason and I would kind of agree with that.
Yeah, I would not disagree with what you said there. That is literally what we talk about when I'm bitching on the phone with you.
Yeah, so that's one of the main.
I said we need a communist party, but when I say that, I don't think anyone should try and start the 25th Communist Party right now. And I don't think any group which has as few members as any of the communist parties that exist should call themselves a Communist Party, right? Like, I think it should be like a title of honor, and that's why I think groups like when you're in the embryonic stage, you should call yourself something like PSL, do like Party for Socialism and Liberation, and then if you ever actually become the Communist Party, at that point you can call yourself the Communist Party.
That's actually
I have no. Listen, I don't have the right, nor I'm telling people who or how they can affiliate themselves. What I'm saying is that I think it is counterintuitive to expanding your political base to start your political education process with a t-shirt of ideological orthodoxy that no one even understands in the first place. It's point one. Number two, that being said, for those of us who are, leftists, because as I said before, and I stand by this, there is no left in America. We just have leftists who have become more nuanced and aware of these various ideological tendencies that we have on the left. The question becomes that we have to admit that there are some people who don't want to popularize their politics because their politics is rooted in overthrowing the state and capital, and they're serious about it. As serious as we are about believing that we want to advance a public goods government or governance, if you will, there are those who we can call comrades on the left who believe that their job is to neutralize the function of the state and capital. We can call them anarchists, we can call them whatever you want. And they are serious about that. And they can intellectually rationalize that. There are some of us who believe that we need to have a socialist revolution in America and internationally. And that's the only way we get justice. There's some of us who believe that working with or infiltrating the Democratic Party is the way to get a public goods governance. The question I'm asking here is that in an organization like DSA, which is a democratic socialist organization, which has a certain political posture as a tendency that may differentiate from other tendencies, how do we create a coherent approach to solidarity, organized in political education, not rooting and saying, well, they got it wrong because they're tankies, or they get it wrong, they're trots, or they get it wrong, they're sock dems, because that makes us all look stupid and incompetent because you're saying that everyone else doesn't agree with you guys because none of you get it right.
Sudip?
I mean, I agree with the idea that we shouldn't have so many sectarian. So I'm kind of mixed about this a little bit. Like, I think the issues the issues we're discussing is a little bit of, I mean, certainly I've seen it in my time organizing on the ground, and I don't always want to say like there is a differentiation between social media and underground because they can be connected, right? But I think what I've seen, to be honest, is not necessarily sectarianism. I think it's actually just like typical things, like the people who are organizing themselves are also learning about topics as they go. Because again, I just want to bring back the fact that, like you mentioned on the show, it's been 50 years of like nearly almost nothing, like really substantial, right? It's like there isn't even like anarchism defeating this or that. It's just literally collapse, right? So it's not surprising for me to meet people who are also learning as they go and also learning as they lead. And that sometimes can lead to some muddied politics and some trying as you go. So I feel like that's the issue, if that's an issue, right? Because frankly, since 2016, I mean, up until 2016, the DSA was just like most socialist groups, to be honest, like 2,000 members.
20 guys in a room.
Yeah, to be really honest, like 15 guys in a room or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like
you and Bashkar.
Right. Yes, like me and him just hanging out with all the old Michael Harrington types who are just like, if we just win the 80s election again, and then like whatever. Like, and let's just create some more right-wing trade unions. I'll be okay.
Jesus.
I don't think that's the issue, really. Like, that's what I mean. Like, even for me, my family is more left oriented. They come from a part of India, West Bengal, that is like familiar with like Communist Party electoralism. So it's never like a bad word for me growing up, right? But even I had to relearn certain things in the context here, being American, growing up in the void, right? And I think the issue is that, really. I don't think it's like sectarianism so much as it's just like people really are trying to keep pace with political disaster while also not having necessarily the language for it now. If there is sectarianism, I've seen it maybe sometimes ironically in educational groups, maybe, because there's a certain kind of thinking you want to impart on people, right? But I don't know. I don't think that's the issue, because if you look at the national DSA, well, let's take, for example, some of the good things that's happening at the DSA level at some point, like the IC committee at least is becoming more and more clear about what anti-imperialism is, right? They're not just being wishy-washy anymore. They're not just saying it as a term of like, we're also anti-imperial. They're like literally saying, we're going to send people to Venezuela, which they did, and bring information. We're going to stand against the Bolivian coup. That's happening, but I think it's rare because of just the Bernie Sanders election, the fact that we've only been growing the last 4 or 5 years of a left or left activists, and the lack of, like, there's elders, but you know, like that's also a bit of a disconnect, right? Like the elders who were imparting those lessons to other leftists in the past, they themselves have been trapped in this kind of like 30, 40 years of just trying to keep the left somewhat alive. So it's like all these different factors playing into why there's a little lack of direction, I would say. Not,
well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Sorry to interrupt you.
No.
So you start off your essay talking about Angela Davis.
Yeah.
And recently, I shared a post, Gloria LaRiva tagged me in, where Angela Davis wrote a letter to the Biden administration asking to release Leonard Peltier, who has caught COVID, and he's like 78. He's got a bunch of health problems. Even before this, he had a bunch of health problems. And of course, you know, people have been fighting for decades to try to get him out of prison. But Angela Davis also gets criticized. She had a scarf line she tried to launch recently, and there was a lot of beef on that. And people were kind of questioning her left bona fides. And, you know, last I checked, not too many of us have been put on trial facing the death penalty for their beliefs. So you guys want to comment on that?
I don't know. That's something too that's like we've had a very real conversation about Angela Davis on this pod or on this show, you know, where like there's, you know, the critiques are handled, you know, or the, you know, are voiced and are backed, and then, you know, but like obviously you don't take away from the mountain of work and effort that woman has put in. And it's I think, yeah, like you get into this thing where like, I mean, Jason, I'm sure you've seen it where, hey, your podcast says this is revolution, but you sell merch.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm constantly called a non-revolutionary because, you know.
Yeah. You know, I don't know. I think that stems to like,
I moved to Mexico because he's too rich.
Yeah. He lives in the penthouse at the beach. But no, I don't know if I kind of just will like tailor to like the capitalist realism, you know, or like just like so steeped as like if you're selling a T-shirt, you know, this is bad because capitalism sell T-shirts, and like allows to just like fucking people
like,
just
do we really think Angela Davis has got a scarf empire at this point?
I mean, first of all, why do people believe that you can't be financially comfortable and be a leftist? And why do people believe that you can't engage in business and commerce and be a leftist? Because they have a very fixed understanding of what left socialism is. Anti-capitalism does not mean no commerce, no trade.
Means no phone, no iPhone. Socialism is no iPhone.
Now you may say that. Well, communism
Who's
is
that guy who just bought a 200K car? I forget his name. Hassan.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think everyone should stop watching Hassan. I think he's having fun.
There's different ideas about this. You know, there's communists who believe that, you know, we should remove all profit motive from all types of economic transactions. There are other people who believe in cooperative economic models who don't believe that we should remove profit margins, that we should put a cap on it. There's some believe that, you know, you should be able to own a house. There's some people believe that we should have cooperative housing. There are different philosophies and ideas about this. The notion that because you're a quote unquote leftist or socialist that you take a vow of poverty to wear, Birkenstocks and wear chinos is pretty freaking absurd.
Well, Pascal, to prove my left bona fides, because I do live off of a dirt road in Mexico where from time to time water just gets shut off. As I went to take a shower yesterday, the water pressure got lower and lower till it felt like it was someone peeing on me, and then the water got shut off. So I had to then.
I thought Donald Trump made an executive order about this.
Well, that's in the U.S. Where you got to
not apply. I thought that's what that NATO thing did.
I mean, I think that our goal in this politics is actually to bring everyone's quality of living up, not bring everyone's quality of living down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know. I think too is there's plenty of reading literature that will allude to if you're going to be a party member or you need to do some type of activism, so but that's where it's if there was one. Yellow background, right? But I can't even fucking remember what I'm saying. Fuck it.
I'm so sorry.
We're not even at 1 hour yet, man. You can't be clapping.
I'm telling you, man, you guys are off the rails already.
53.
Dude, I'm so.
This is the one. So what is going
And he
on?
didn't even let Sudip on for the first 15 minutes. He did 38 minutes.
Oh shit. I do. Took himself off, mute himself.
Take him off the screen. But no, back to Sudip, man, because I don't want him to feel like we're kind of dodging around his essay, because he's really the point of focus here in terms of that is that how I kind of disagree with you in the position that there really is no sectarianism. I actually think there is a lot of sectarianism. And the reason why I do believe there's a lot of sectarianism.
I mean, when we said that, people in chat were like, fuck anarchists, fuck trots. Yeah. People like, don't be sectarian.
I think maybe to Sudip's point is that this may be something that's more of an online issue. But maybe it's because, if you're organizing with the DSA and there's no connection with PSL people or socialist alternative people. So, I mean, that's I guess my question would be, I know, and I'm a member of the DSA. I don't see a lot of inner cooperation with other groups. But if we show up to the same place, there's no issues there,
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know. That's where I think it's extremely disappointing is that there's a whole lot of energy in the online left that could be placed better.
Mm-hmm.
But it is more into the sectarianism. And chat, I'm not talking about you. I know you were just joking. Please give us money.
I definitely want to get to the online stuff when I'm with it, because that's we can have a whole.
Can you let Sudip respond first before you start yelling at people?
I totally agree that there is I'm not denying that there's sectarianism, but I don't I'll take an example. I was a delegate for the DSA convention, I think last year. I can't even, because time is so weird, but there was sectarianism in the different discussions. For example, when we debated joining this group of political parties in Latin America, which included the Venezuelan leadership, the party that they support, Cuba. There was debate, which I think is also necessary. So that's what for me, it's a little bit of okay, there needs to be debate. There needs to be a kind of sectarianism in the sense of having a good faith debate about where we need to go. Because if you avoid debate too, and avoid sectarianism in that sense, overall, you can also then end up in a very muddied populist politics that takes positions that also detracts from what from other people joining maybe or having some clarity. But in my experience of the convention, there was a sect that was very, very invested in not joining, but they were causing some issue maybe, and they had some valid points, but the majority of people were like on board, right? They voted yes. And I think the majority of people themselves are therefore then just wrapped up in the day-to-day, and at the same time, don't really always know what's like. I've met tons of people who are Marxist or say they're communist, who maybe says something, I forget what, but I'm just like, that's not really like, but I'm not going to be the one, first of all, to be like, that sucks. You know what I mean? But I just think like there's a lot of that going on, because the way the group has grown is exponential. Like it's tons of people that grow. I think membership now is dipping, and that's I don't know yet why. I have my own guesses, but I want to be honest about like, I don't know why necessarily. It could be burnout, but there was still an exponential growth, right? And I don't think that's from sectarian stuff. Like I don't think the PSL, IMT were like, there are thousands of people flock to us in that sense. And then, like it's just a ton of people who are into Bernie, some other folks who are like, this sounds pretty okay, I do want to check it out. Some who stayed. And at the same time, just sort of relearning certain things. I know I sound very like, I'm not trying to avoid critique or anything, but I just think legitimately there's a lot of people who have no clue about any of this stuff. Like at our Pauled, I am trying to follow the lead of our leadership to talk to now be more explicit about what we need to learn. So in our reading groups, we do emphasize Marxist texts or a kind of material analysis of history that can go into the contemporary, because that's the frustrating part. Like you have people who are just so in tune with like the 1920s or 30s, but that's also another issue. Like that's not a sectarianism. That's just like, that's great, but that's not even Marxist. You need to kind of update and see where that goes. But I think overall, now we're doing a little bit of that direction, but even then there's discussion, and even then people are coming at it not from like, oh, well, I thought as a Trotskyite, this is wrong. It's more like, oh, I never heard of this, or doesn't sound totally right. And I think you can see a lot more of that even on internationalism. I think overall, like our chapter, everyone, pretty much as far as I've interacted with, view the struggle as internationalism, right? But then considering what to do, I don't think of it as like people taking sectarian positions. It's more like people taking positions based on maybe not knowing exactly what's going on, and saying like, yeah, there's nobody in our chapter who's like, well, we need a Trotskyite little group, or we need a Stalinist. Like no one even, I mean, I don't like that discussion anyway. I'm just like, what are you, what's happening in Kerala, India? What's happening in Cuba? What's happening in Vietnam? What can we do better, or what can we learn? Those are not sectarian things to me. When there's debates, usually it's just like people have questions, and then once in a while there's someone who dribbles in who is a sectarian person, and they can take over a conversation. But it's like one or two people. It just happens to be they're very loud about it. They're very driven. They're very confident in things that they know. And then you're just like, okay, just, you just have to remember it's 14 other people who are just like trying to figure out how to make sense of a world system that's becoming more cruel, more chaotic, and even in some ways unstable, right?
Yeah, but the thing is, though, part of the consequence of you, I think, having those experiences is that you're working within the framework of DSA. DSA is just one of the sects in the sectarian flag. I'm a member of DSA. I'm also a member of Black Alliance for Peace, which is an organization that has a politics that differs in many ways, than DSA on certain questions. And what I'm saying is that I think that your position that this isn't really a problem comes from the vantage of the Bernie Sanders left. And for me, who has been dealing with the left many years before Sanders came about, is that one of the problems that those who were in the left or leftists before Sanders came about is that these DSA types believe that they are inventing something new when they're not. And there are many people who not only realize that they're not, distrust the DSA and its position because of the way they know the organization was founded and the position it's had on key issues in the past, like the Vietnam War, like on patriotism. And that for some people, they believe that the key framing of the organization on those issues is not only antithetical to their sect, but fundamentally not left at all.
But can we agree that how they felt about the Vietnam War and who was part of that organization then is not the organization that it is today? And also,
I don't
can we
disagree with
agree
that.
that part of the arrogance of youth is constantly thinking that you're reinventing the wheel as you are just using the same wheel? I mean, that does happen. And there
I don't-
is sometimes a pushback between seeing younger people maybe get a little more momentum. I mean, we have to kind of admit that that could be a small problem as well.
Mhm.
There can be a bit of jealousy.
I'm not denying that those positions are very likely, possible, probable in any way. But I'm also saying is that doesn't deny the fact that there are people who find legitimate problems with the political and ideological posture of this particular coterie of leftists.
And I think that like so that's very real. And I'm hoping what this conversation is about is getting over that. And I think part of it is like having that clear vision. You know, and this is something talked about plenty of times. Like I don't think there's enough really of saying this is what we're going for. You know, and like it does kind of have to be broad in some certain ways. But a lot of what ends up, you know, like we got to build the bridge, you know, before we can cross it. And in some cases, there's just a lot of people arguing like we're already on the other side, and we haven't even we haven't even started measuring yet. Yeah, so I think like, part of it is like any group, you know, DSA, PSL, Socialist Alternative, taking critique and being able to fix that critique, that's left, right? And so if we can see organizations doing that, we should that should be taken into account. The improvement of the structure of the organization, that should be taken into account. And and like, and then at the end of the day too, it's not, hey, DSA is great, but hey, I can see changes in things, and especially when you mentioned the international committee that has been doing, I think, fantastic work. I think and like moving forward, and this isn't a critique, but it would be the next step is like, how do we start getting that international labor connection?
I
Because
mean,
that's like, because then we're really fucking cooking with gas. But that's at the end of the day too, is that really, those are the things where we can talk about these things. I think we should be talking about these things, any critique of any organization. But what is the point of the critique? Is it to say you now just need to sub to my channel and then sit down at home and not do anything? Or is it go back to the meeting, fix it, and then do the work in the community again?
I think that Marcus brings up a really great point, and I think to the credit of the organization, and we can get into the nuances if they got it right or wrong, whatever. I appreciate that. I think that DSA is moving towards the left on the imperialism and foreign policy question. I think that they are trying to incorporate analyses of some comrades to their left on issues of American foreign policy and international action. Sure, we can criticize them adhering to certain analysis or implementing certain. Yeah, we can do that, but I see that as a positive because that was a critique that a lot of people had about them. Now, I listen. I didn't join DSA because I thought it was worthless. I joined DSA because I believe that they have a structure and they have an organizing capacity that is valuable to shift people who are sometimes called normies or non-political people into a more progressive or left framing. My frustration with this institution is not even based on its ideological tenet. It's that in the COVID moment, it has allowed the reactionary right to out-organize it completely and maintained a zeitgeist of oppositional politics when all it seems like the leftists we have now, because we have no left, we have leftists, are interesting in is either complaining about the Democrats, coalescing with about the Democrats, or whining about the Democrats.
I mean, that's an online phenomenon, I would say. I'll defer to our guest and even Stefan, two people that have existed in movements outside of the online world. Would you agree that sometimes that's more of an online phenomenon, Stefan? What Pascal is discussing?
Well, in terms of focusing on like mainstream,
Focusing on American parliamentary political maneuvers, 5 politicians in America. There is a ton of Canadian podcasts that cover strictly American political movements. The only one I really watch in your hood is what are those cats? Norva? Am I saying it right?
Navarra.
Yeah, and they don't really
Navarra.
talk about the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously the difference I think between the US and the UK with this kind of stuff is that in the UK we do have a left, which isn't necessary to say it's very good, but there is certainly a left. There is the union left, which is it's big. It doesn't mean it does anything which is particularly useful, but it exists as this whole institutional structure, which just doesn't really exist in the UK when it's directly linked to the Labour Party, which again, I mean, there was a serious effort to make the Labour Party a thing of socialism between 2015 and 2019, which again failed. But the union leadership now is in quite big conflict with the Labour Party and so on. But these things definitely do exist. So obviously during this time of 2015 to 2019, there was a big focus in the UK on our own political maneuverings. And then since then, I don't think the left's found kind of in Britain what it should be doing. I think it's generally a bit lost. And there's lots of stuff where it's like people are just like cheering on when like Starmer gets like harassed by anti-vax protesters outside Parliament. It's like, fuck those guys, like they suck. Like, and it just shows a kind of like anti-politics of kind of being like, just when this guy that you don't like, who like took away your favorite toy, Corbyn, like gets fucked with, you're just like, yeah, he got fucked with. But I'm still kind of, I'm quite optimistic about the UK because I think we do have this left from the unions. And I was thinking about international campaigns and like with the Trade Union Council, they have all these international officers who are, they can do this international stuff because they have many professional officers that do this stuff. And one of the big things was the biggest movement outside of Turkey Kurdistan to free Abdullah Öcalan, the leader of the Kurdish freedom movement, is in the UK. And at each trade union congress, they'll get all the trade union leaders with his like face out showing the thing, which was really quite this alien image. But it shows that kind of like I think there's probably not enough effort made to kind of, because the trade union congress, through not that much effort from people, can be made to focus on these issues, and they have like a massive amount of money and resources and all this kind of stuff. And then eventually, like now, like central committee members of the PKK are like, the trade movement in England, that's great. That's like our best friends.
I saw a comment where someone said that the fascists are playing 4-dimensional chess, and we can't even find the checkerboard.
Well, I mean, you talk about Daniel Bessner's piece about the end of mass politics, and I'll admit I haven't read the piece, but I did watch him on Left Reckoning, and actually I've been talking to Bessner about coming down here and actually doing an interview out there on the terrace, and we have a talk. But
well, we're having Anton on in a few weeks to talk about hyperpolitics.
Hyperpolitics?
Yeah.
I mean, in the organizing world, it seems like that mass politics. Pascal said this the other day. I don't remember if it was on air or not. He was like, "Sure is working for the right, mass politics."
I said it a couple of times.
Well, and this is where like the trucker convoy, which I heard is like coming to DC in March.
Oh, get ready for St. Patty's Day. It'll be great.
I hope both sides have fun.
Damn, I didn't even think, man. It's gonna be a fun party.
Bunch of drunk truckers. That sounds like a great grand old time.
Dope. We're gonna organize the working class around Jameson. But no, I think this is like a very it's scary, it's sad, it's fucking stupid on a lot of levels. But it is interesting in that, like this is where you see a lot of this. I mean, I think just what is it? just on the face leftists or people who just say, oh, like some of these like social patriots or whatever, they're saying, hey, they're workers, they're truckers and whatever the hell. And it's like, don't worry about these Nazi flags. Don't worry about that because they drove a semi truck here, or this guy's got an F-150. Like, it's fine. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, no, that guy's an owner operator. That F-150 costs about 60 fucking grand. Like, what are you talking about? But I think there is this, and like people talk, oh, they're CIA because they're saying so much dumb shit. I'm like, I've met these type of dumb people, and buying a webcam's not that expensive. Like, these takes can come organically without the CIA.
I mean, people are also like saying like, oh, truckers are going to do like fascism. They're going to coup the government and do fascism or whatever. And this is also like equally ridiculous, right?
Yes.
Like, I think we should just not be that bothered about them. They're just kind of annoying people in kind of the city center, which leftists do a lot too,
I really think that the truck driver phenomenon is kind of fascinating to me on a couple of levels, right? Is that, number one, I believe that anyone has the right to protest, period. Bottom line. You have the right, you have the right to protest what you don't agree with. So they want to protest the COVID mandates. I think we all can agree that the way in which all of the nation states and all of the ruling classes have dealt with COVID, but particularly in the West and the United States, has been a disaster. They basically have been ineffective in conveying consistency, integrity, or trust in any way. So I can understand why people want to protest anything having to do with COVID mandates or so on and so forth. So the question becomes, is the problem the subject that they're protesting, or is the problem the makeup of the people that are the protesters? In other words, do you not support the COVID mandate protests because you think it's bad to protest COVID mandates? Or do you not support the COVID mandate protesters because you think that people among them are just right-wing fascist Trumpists? Because I can tell you, and I'm not going to say there's a lot, there is a faction of people who are joining the anti-mandate politics that are not right-wingers. Some of them are doing it under racial nationalist grounds. Some of them are even left. As a matter of fact, I'm not saying that the majority, but what I also
in the
I
UK,
also tell you is that the people who are sympathizing with that are growing, and they're not just growing amongst right wingers.
Finish your thoughts, Stefan.
I mean, I was going to say that in the UK, Jeremy Corbyn has recently come out and saying he's against all vaccine mandates. But also, it's very interesting because in the UK, the kind of leading force in zero COVID has been our Communist Party.
Can I just add the thing about the mass politics thing? So I did another article about 9/11, its anniversary, the war on terror, and I did get a chance to talk to Bessner about that. And I think from what I understood, the mass politics thing is about the fact that less and less our institutions are responding or are more sort of, I would say protected, but just like there's several layers now, more so to actually get heard or to have anything done. I mean, I don't think the left actually, like I'm reading something, I don't think the left is like bad at mobilizing. I think we're pretty good actually. Like the uprisings that happened, you can call that a left phenomena or like an anti, but the issue comes after the step after that, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's necessarily like we're bad at not getting people out. It's like, it's the day after. Like, I know, for instance, when Palestine happened, when Israel was doing its 7 billion attempt at killing Palestinians and stuff, like, I remember it wasn't super difficult to get people out. Like, we, get certain orgs involved. Some of them might be more liberal, but they're Palestinian identified. Some of them are young people for the first time organizing, which is what we want. And there were thousands of people in and around New Brunswick and several other rallies in the area. But of course, since then, there's been a little bit of, like in the news, it's kind of, I don't want to say back to normal, but certainly having that like institutional effect, that's kind of what's missing. So there is this mobilizing high that happens, but then afterwards, where do people land? Do they land in a labor union or a tenants union, or do they land in some kind of way where they can, again, that there's a certain way of like still learning what to do, still learning how to build solidarity with each other, being socialized in a way where they can actually do the hard work of trusting each other. Because that's the thing that's really a difficult part, right? Like we're so much like webbed into our work lives. We know who we know, but even with COVID, it's kind of decimated that. There is understandably fear of, or not fear, like annoyance or not trusting even your neighbor, right? Even if you attend the same church or whatever, there's like, I'll just see them once in a while. That's nice. And then with COVID, it's like maybe, and then later on with this sort of like attempt to get us all at the, in person at least, now it's just like panicking about that in a sense. So there's all these other things I think are the issue. I don't think it's necessarily lack of mobilizing. It's just of a broader problem.
Who's winning the mobilizing war? So let's just take Minneapolis, right? You mentioned the police station getting burned down. And if we really look at that whole movement, a lot of the people that were involved in the burning down of that, and just people involved in all the protests, whatever you want to call it, weren't politically active people. They weren't really even politically affiliated. They were frustrated people for several reasons, right? And if we look at Minneapolis now, aren't people kind of upset about this young man that just got shot in his house? I thought they were supposed to be getting rid of the police station. That movement, while we had, I guess they had some people from it that got on the city council, what did it really accomplish? Ultimately, if here we are less than 2 years later, and there's not even the same uproar for the exact same thing that happened to cause it in the first place. If you believe that George Floyd was the reason, are we finally becoming burnt out on the snuff films that are the news?
I think there's a few things which like I feel like we could go do a whole show off of like what are the emotional triggers that cause a video to go fucking viral when someone's murdered on and I think the gun just plays a part. I think like most centrists, most radical centrists, are against people having guns, in general. And so like just that fact that it, literally did what anyone would do if the remote was next to him, you would have reached for it. Like you when it's just insane. But like that's why I think it's not having that same type of reaction. But also too, like 100% Sudip and even Kwame Ture like spoke of this, the difference between mobilization and organization. And I think this is kind of the thing of like the left. There's no body that's going to be able to take some organic mass movement and then convert it 100% into like whatever you're trying to do. I think what the left needs to realize is that when there's people out in the streets, meet them where they are. There may not be, you're not going to get all 100% out of everybody that was at that march, but you're going to get people. And that's where I think the even the talks of like, no, don't go to these marches, they're worthless, don't do electoralism, it's worthless. At this point too, it's like you're not meeting Americans where they are.
I know PSL did really well out of the summer uprisings.
And to your point also, like, yeah, I mean, our chapter doesn't really, so to the earlier point about the Democratic Party infighting or how we should relate to it as being a focal point of so many, like, so I'm just speaking based on our chapter work and what I know, because I want to keep it like the issue with DSA is like, it is fairly decentralized. So it's like, I don't really know what's going on. Like there isn't like an edict sent down and everyone has to do it. Like even with the PRO Act, where I think it was necessary for people to get on the phone and try to get either legislation passed like that, or just have that experience of calling people and trying to, get them to call their legislature. Like those things are important. And even though our chapter we don't do electoralism right now, like we have, because it's also, haven't found any good candidates. We just don't want to throw ourselves to people who will then just be like, and I felt that vibe for some folks. They're just like, oh, DSA, like, the way they say democratic socialist, I'm like, all right, well, you're saying it in a way like you just heard about it. I'm not trying to be weird, but if you're running for office, that it does matter then what you're saying, right? Like it's different from a person just coming in and being like, oh, I heard this is really cool, versus a guy who's like taking pictures with you and trying to like make it seem like your chapter is doing that. But yeah, to your point, I don't see that conversation in our chapter so much, just because there is a good job, I feel, of trying to keep it a little bit focused on things that we could do rather than running off to the races when we don't have a good candidate. But there's other chapters I've seen who are doing that kind of work and trying to build some independent, like using it to what you're saying, Market, using it as a strategic thing, like not as like it's either or, but more like reading the tea leaves of what's going on. And like you said, a bit of like, okay, well, people's general interaction with left politics or anything like that is going to be hopefully their union, which is not. That's the other issue. That's why I relate. Like, it's devoid again. Like, you don't have that training. Like, it's a significant thing. Like, to be in a room of people thinking about certain issues together is a practice that people need to develop. And that's lacking. And then the other thing is electoral politics. So much as like the problem becomes again, what is the long-term goal? Is it just to get the person elected, or is it to get them elected and then at the same time keep it going, keep it churning, have the people win battles? By the way, I think maybe your podcast mentioned it or someone else. I do agree. I just want to quickly, I don't think it's a good idea to just say to people, well, you're going to learn how much the system sucks because this demand won't happen. Like, that's not really useful. Like, you want people to win and feel excited. So maybe you can turn the electoral win into something where it's like, look, it's not over, but it's a win. You got to keep going. And I've seen a little bit of that, but I totally agree. I don't think it's like electoralism or non-electoralism. It's like the long-term oversight of where you want it to go. And that's the same thing what I was relating with socialism. I do think eventually you're going to have conversations with people about these alternative visions of a society. Because in the past, when you don't do that, people can sometimes be satisfied in saying, oh, I got my wage increase, right? Which is good. I'm not saying like we need that. Like we have like limited things, but it's a problem when you don't criticize the instability of capital. You don't like try to reflect to people like, hey man, like look at the 50s and 60s, even though it was not a perfect picture, even those wins that happened turned away because there was this other like instability that was still there for capital, and people didn't have the language to interpret that instability. And so they were just like desperate and then voting in certain things and doing certain things. So we want to avoid that. But again, that's all predicated on what your long-term vision is. So yeah, it's like a strategic nature of it. And I totally agree. Like I totally agree with the idea of like electoralism is not my enemy, but it just depends how it's connected and what you're trying to gain from it. And I do get frustrated. Maybe you can say it's an online thing, but some of that is there. Like if there's any kind of debate, sometimes it's electoralism, non-electoralism, not Democratic Party and how much you want to organize in them. It's more like just, oh, it's a distraction. And some people have a good reason for that because they have been in the movement for a while now and been like these 4 years and 5, 6, 7 years are terrible. Like it's not a nice time to be existing. Like it's terrible. Like it's a lot of great things I want to like reference, but there's a lot of like reasons to be cynical. But again, just to say again, I echo what you're saying. It's like a long-term vision that needs to be attached to how you're viewing these kind of topics or issues.
I mean, like this is like that's a struggle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this is like something too of like where and someone mentioned like, oh hey, we've had like the right's playing 4D chess. We can't find the checkerboard. Well, that's because our chessboard, our checkerboard, mousetrap, sorry, tic-tac-toe, it got nuked, it got blown up, it got assassinated, it got oppressed. It like that's what happened to our board pieces. And so, I think that that's I mean something that's been very helpful in the way that I've been moving, at least especially for the past year, is just really understanding how much capital and the state has done to take away the mature left. And then this is what we are left with. And like, there's no magic button to being the vanguard fucking party. Like, there's no magic button to just, oh, hey, we were going to call ourselves the Communist Party. And therefore we now have all of the power that comes with a real fucking political, like, no, you can't just imagine it. You need to do the work. And I think with people having understanding that one, this is going to take a long time, and they don't call it the struggle because it's easy, And so you got to take losses. That's why they call it the left. It starts with L. We're going to take some L's, but you keep moving forward, and then like you said, having that clarity of the goal, so that that hey, you can take a loss and know that it's not it's not the end. You know that you can engage in something that maybe for a short term, right? And then move on from that. And like, that's where, especially you get into electoral politics, and we've talked about this plenty of times, is like the fact that so many people do not engage with the United States, an organized left can very much come through and inject themselves into all sorts of areas of society within the local level. And then hopefully you can get some federal people who just popularize some of the ideas that make it easier for the work on the ground.
I wanna jump in here definitely. That the notion that the leftists, because we don't have a left, the leftists we have are losing because the right wing is well funded, or the right wing has more money, or the right is doing magical, amazing things and this and that. I don't take that as an excuse, because what we saw in the right since 2016 is we saw a kook who was literally a talk show personality, who was not the most funded political candidate or even the most funded political faction of his party, take over the right-wing bourgeois political party in this country based largely on messaging. That happened with people who were much more organized, have much deeper pockets. The Koch brothers were not down with Trump in 2016 at all. The forces of the military-industrial complex was not down with Trump in 2016 at all. On messaging, he was able to take over the right-wing bourgeois party. Now, Bernie in 2016 was able to capture about 30-some-odd% of the left-wing bourgeois party. It's not a bad thing. What was the difference between Bernie and Trump after they were purged from positions of power in their respective party? Trump kept organizing and Bernie kept coalescing into the same people who shivved him politically.
I mean, but I also think what happened with the right wing was still, like, at the time when Trump got his, like, the interesting thing about the right wing is that they have a base. It's weird. The GOP is tied with their base.
No, they created a new base. The base that Trump created was not the same base.
Right, but I'm not saying even that was a long-term project still of like what Marxists said of willing to fail. Like the Barry Goldwater race was a trial balloon of certain ideas. It did not work. It was looked at as a failure, but they kept going, realizing that this is going to attract the pockets they needed, the extra pockets maybe, but also a kind of like Sunbelt constituency and other folks. So I'm just saying, I totally agree that there's a different mechanism here in understanding what we need to do versus what the right can do. But I also still view what the right had done and taking over the party was still a very like decades-long process. You go from, Dwight Eisenhower, who's still a, an asshole, but like you go from that to then Reagan, who's more of an asshole, and then at the same time you just devolve into more ass, and then suddenly everything.
Nixon, right?
Yeah, Nixon. I mean, Nixon. Yeah, definitely.
But do you start even before that with like McCarthy? If you really think about it.
Yeah.
Kind of kicking out communists in the 40s.
Yeah. All I'm saying is that there's a long.
Where does it really start?
Trend.
It's been going on for years, and what the Powell memo.
Right. But even I just want to add one quickly. But then when you look at for sure, and I think what I was referenced also in other pieces is like. There were, to what Pascal is saying, there's certainly these overarching forces, but it doesn't mean that every instance of the right winning is just a fate. It's just a fate of more money. I'm not saying that. Like if you look at the 30s and 40s, eventually the CPUSA also began to fall in line. I know you guys talked about this, a little bit of the romantic idea of the Popular Front, right? Politics, but they fell in line with that, right? And they gave up building an independent constituency that they were trying to build. So they took those missteps too. And by the time they were doing that, there's this right-wing faction who's like not playing that. They were cultivating their own constituency to be that lever to control within the party what to do. And I feel like that's been missing for a while, or there's been fits and starts of that here and there. But since the 80s, it's been like almost like one side has been doing that, and the other side has been kind of just like, I don't want to say like, fucking up, but like, to be really honest, overwhelmed by everything that happened because the Great Society fell apart. Like lots of things happened where it was even like to have a Reagan and to have a Trump was like in some ways unthinkable, even in the late 1960s, early 1970s. Like even Nixon had some
does that go back?
policies
Does that go back to the idea that? But does that go back to the idea that the left was too steeped in academia at that point and moving away from a working class? Because as we get to the later 60s, we start to see kind of the failure of maybe the race-based programs of the Great Society, right? In the LBJ administration, and then you do get the rise of Reagan and the Goldwater Republican. That while they lose on Social Security and what becomes Medicare and Medicaid, they do keep hammering away at the quote unquote failures of public goods governance to the point where we are today, where unions are bad, public goods governance just helps people be children of the nanny state.
Freeloaders.
Yeah, freeloaders. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, there is a book by Nelson Lichtenstein. He's a labor historian, and he does talk about there was a disconnect between some people. Like there was this kind of like, if you look at that book and see what he's referencing, there was a discussion about like labor unions also being a old world like institution. They're not, like what we need. They're also corrupted. Yeah, because like some of them did vote. I mean, I think it's complicated too. I think it's on both ends. There were labor groups that were like looking at their quote unquote self-interest and defending the war because they're aligned with LBJ. And then there was the left, or what do you call the left, thinking of it in terms of like that. I just think there was I don't have all the answers, but in my head, all I'm just saying is that there was a lot of pressures from capital, instability. There was missteps too, to what you're saying, Pat. Like there are missteps that were taken. And then there was frankly like that cutting off between some aspects of the left and labor, where now they're sort of like the new left is repressed, and then labor unions are holding on in the 80s, but also holding on to industries that are no longer the major, bulk of what the United States is in the new economy, right? Like a lot of like white collar workers never really engage with labor politics, right? A lot of low wage workers too, in some sense. You see like a lot of that, with the Uber economy now, like there's a lot of things that also labor unions did not keep pace with, right? Even as a TA, educator, grad worker, like the university's changed, right? There's not a lot of security to sometimes defend. We have a union that's really great, but the whole parameter has kind of shifted to being adjuncts and PT. Like there's so many things that went on that I think we just didn't prepare for. Because part of it was this falling in love with like, okay, we got the Great Society, we got the New Deal. Let's just keep expanding that to maybe some degree to now include other people, versus having that left wing that could have prepared people. Like say, hey, it's gonna suck, it's happening. But you don't fall hopeless to that. You don't start to look at your neighbor or to somebody else who might have a little bit of a better position than you and start to see that as the issue, right? You don't like have a view that it's the academic. It's like something more holistic than that.
I mean, my position, first of all, I don't think any of us on this show romanticize the Popular Front. I definitely will publicly state it here. I think the Popular Front was a mistake. It was absolutely a mistake. And I think that a large consequence of what we have today in American politics was because the left, particularly the CPUSA and the Comintern, agreed to engage in the Popular Front.
I'm saying you guys don't romanticize it. That's what I'm saying.
No, we don't. We definitely don't.
Yeah.
I think that Popular Front posturing is something that still plagues people on the left today, to this day, as a matter of fact. But on a basic fundamental point, right? And I don't want it to come off that I'm trying to be antagonistic to the Sanders DSA kind of faction. I'm not trying to be antagonistic or say that they were worthless. I actually kind of disagree with Chris Hedges in his position that, you know, there was no value to Sanders. I think Sanders was very, very valuable. I think that Sanders created a mobilization. Listen, for a guy who calls himself a democratic socialist in 2016, after almost 50 years of capitalist realism, to take over 30% of the Democratic Party in terms of actual people who can actually vote in the primary, that's not insignificant. My critique is what he did with that power afterwards, which proved what everyone who was to his left said about him, including Chris Hedges, correct, is that his only project is to coalesce with the Democratic Party, which, regardless of how many Jacobin articles we read, is exactly what he did. And all of this talk about, you know, his ability to take over the Democrat was crushed, not so much because it was ordained divinely, it's that there was no grassroots organizing to even do what effectively he had the power to do, which was create a left flank of the Democratic Party in the party itself.
But here's a question: is that projection on Bernie Sanders as, you know, kind of a magical unicorn candidate that's supposed to do all that instead of a establishment Democrat?
But this is the thing, though. He marketed himself as creating an organizational revolution. I'm not pulling this out of the hat. I'm telling you what the guy's talking points were himself.
And this is where I think, like, there needs to be a build out in order for that actual jump to happen. Because at this point now, you've got a bunch of people who are antagonistic to the Democratic Party while being within it. And there's nowhere to go. You know, like, you could put an I next to your name, and in some states that'll fly, Vermont, Maine, Kentucky. But that's really not, you know, available for everyone. And this is like 100% I agree. Like, Bernie at the outset said, listen, I win, we're going to need to continue this political movement in order to get the things that we want. I lose, Senator Bernie Sanders. You know, and that's what happened. You know, and like, those critiques are very valid. But you know, at the end of the day, it's like, that's what the fucking deal that Bernie Sanders was saying. It's like, I win, I need us to continue this on in order to even have a chance at getting the things we want. I lose, and it's back to Senator from Vermont, and this is what has played out. And you know, at the end of the day, though, I think what is needed is that actual organizing and on the fucking ground. So instead of, hey, we've got all these Bernie Sanders campaign offices, those offices need to figure out, and maybe not all of them, but you need to figure out how to then transition those offices into permanent places for social organizing, right? Like, that's the steps that I think, if you're going to be engaged
now, right?
in electorals. What's up?
Too late now.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. It's like but people still, there's still like campaigns, and as of right now, you've got people across the country that are now getting into their campaign offices. If you are on the left and you are supporting one of those, what is that campaign's plan to keep this thing going?
Well, let me ask this question to the panel and to the chat as a whole. And, you know, someone is, you know, upset with me in the chat because they made a very, very, you know, false statement about.
I mean, you were kind of proceeding on like a false basis anyway, because they were saying the 1905 revolution didn't achieve anything, and so it was similar to 2020. But it did achieve a very major thing, which was to get the Duma. And then the creation of
1905 is not where we are right now. It's a totally different time in history than where we are right now in 2022.
Yeah, but I'm just saying it's a bad comparison anyway, because the 1905.
We're not talking about 1905. We're talking about now. And when you have to go back,
you really don't want to talk about 1905.
If you want to talk, we're in 1905 right now. You know, we didn't have in 1905 the internet. It's like people always go back to the French Revolution. It's a different time.
That's one of my frustrating things. Like, oh, you just can't trust sock dems. That's why DS. It was like,
it's a different time.
It's not the same thing, man.
It's not the same thing. We have to admit, it's not the same thing. That police station burned down, and everybody patted themselves on the back, and the kid got shot. by the police
Hold
in
on.
the same city. That
Is
was
someone
supposed
trying
to
to
get
say
taken
that the
down because the
1905
politicians in that city, the city council said, we're going to get rid of the police department, and everybody. We did a whole show about it. We
Well, and I
literally
guess
had the
my
journalists
question
that
is-
covered the show.
My
They covered
question,
the
Jason,
whole right. What's up?
could you see that as a part of a general movement? Is he say it's like, oh hey, there's like this is, and this is where too of like sometimes like taking some L's and then like learning from it and then moving on, because
Pascal,
at the end of the day it's like what happened?
what
right?
did
It's
everyone agree upon? Who won out of that whole thing? Who walked away the victor?
the same people who've been winning.
Let me ask you a question. Is someone actually saying that the George Floyd protests were analogous to the 1905 Russian Revolution commencement?
Yeah, there was. But I mean, now chats argue about trans people, so it's like.
No,
Oh,
I
we
do remember.
shouldn't worry too much about what they're saying.
I do remember Tsar Nicholas taking a knee in kente cloth, and thanking some of the protesters that they murdered for their sacrifice. Yeah, yep.
Sudip, I want to ask you this. I'm friends with another, kind of decent sized organizer, and he tells a very interesting story about how they were trying to fight. I think it was a pipeline, and they had stopped a construction crew. And when the construction crew couldn't do what they wanted to do, move forward over, then maybe they formed a chain. I forget exactly what they did. They all celebrated. And the construction crew just waited and laughed at them because they knew once they were done celebrating, they were going to do what the fuck they wanted to do anyway.
Yeah.
And that he learned a lot from that L, but he had to admit he took that L.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people can't admit they're taking these L's because there's a lot of fucking celebrating.
Yeah.
I mean, we definitely talk about history. Everything has context, but we can't romanticize the past all the time.
Right. I think to Stefan's point, I just think even in that context, it's a little bit of a misreading of history itself. Just like to say that everything started with 1917 and just that happened is also a problematic thing to think about. Like there is a lot of like reasons to understand that history with that, anti-colonial struggle. But I do think I just want to just reference the fact that, yeah, we're in a different territory. And that's what I meant earlier about even with education, it needs to adapt to what people need to know, which is like even federal politics. Like what is American federalism? How does that affect what you're trying to do? Things like that. But another thing is also like realizing the DSA or a lot of left groups may have been growing, but are not growing as much as it should necessarily. But that doesn't mean also you can't do things that are effective. Like for instance, we have leaders in our chapter who have done a lot to promote and support Starbucks workers, right? And in the past, they've done similar things, standing in solidarity with, I think, car manufacturer strikers nearby in PA. And doing that kind of important work of also just realizing our capacity. Like realizing like it's not really smart to just like say like, what we need to do is go into every single workplace and just work for, and build that. And that's important, but we also don't have the other thing, which is the 1905 or whatever you want to call it. We are not going to, if all of DSA in New Jersey came together and decide we're going to lead a revolution, we're all going to be doomed.
Like what led to that revolution? Was it just frustration on the ground, or there's a lot more involved?
One of the
there's also
things
some luck too, right? Like there's also the war that happened. What I don't want to get, because I do think it's going to get into that problematic of like viewing it as what's happening now, but one lesson is like if there's salting, it was salting the ground. Like they had conversations with veterans of the war that was ongoing and people at the front, soldiers were involved, right? Like, taking that information and that idea, there's a party out there that's advocating for the end of war. There was a lot of this preparation beforehand that had to happen when things began to really, I don't want to say come apart, but began to like open up, right? And I think right now, I just want to, because what we're doing is it's not the same, like in that same way. But I'm just saying, like, if there's anything that's important, it's like I'm an activist. Like I'm just being really real here. Like I've organized some, but I do not think of myself as an organizer. I'm always down to like learn from organizers and take the lead from them. And what I've seen, the best kind of organizers I've known are the people who like look at the Starbucks protest or the organizing and be like, let's figure out what they need. Let's help in some way. And then let's connect with the workers there too, who might be left in some instances, might not yet, but at the very base are interested in thinking about certain issues in a while, right? So I think that's what could work in some ways. So I'm just trying to be, I'm not trying to say, but I'm just like, there are things that are different. So there's no revolution tomorrow, but there are also things different from even 2015, 2016 to some degree, where there is still some ways to move that was different before. Before it was like, I'll be real, like my parents really, 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 really adore Obama, right? There's one, like I was an undergrad, like freshman when he got elected. I had some misgivings based on other things, but I eventually fell into that pattern, right? But that's also because like no one was really telling me, hey, this is just this version of politics. There's actual left or something going on or a DSA. I had no idea what DSA was. Like I was a leftist. I called myself a socialist even, but I would hate myself talking to myself back then. But like I didn't know what DSA was. I just Googled it one day because I heard like AOC talk about it. I was like, oh, what's DSA? And I was like, oh, it seems interesting. I'll check it out, right? So that's different now. There is like signposts that people could use. And also the Great Resignation. There's like, I'm not trying to be super positive. I'm just saying the landscape.
It's okay to be positive.
Well, then let's be honest. I think it's going to happen tomorrow. There's going to be a revolution.
Let's go.
Let's go. Like it's going to be tomorrow.
To the streets, chat. Let's go.
I do have a question I do want to ask to the whole panel, and I apologize if this is too domestic, Stefan. I'm sorry. You were busy fighting for freedom when this shit was going on, so I apologize if you have to say sorry, man. I was actually doing real shit. But seeing Starbucks unionize as a former employee of Starbucks is actually really fascinating to me, because one of the things that Starbucks did for employees was kind of give them a lot of leeway as far as, you know, working around everyone's schedule. But it ended up being a problem, right? Mm-hmm. I actually have friends that have taken sabbatical that worked at Starbucks for so long. So seeing them unionize, how was Starbucks able to succeed, especially because you're constantly dealing with this population of workers that kind of don't, a lot of them I work with a lot of kids that worked like 3 hours a day. They just didn't care. This was like the little thing they did while they were going to school. So how does Starbucks win this war and Amazon fail so hard?
Ooh, say it again for the people in the back.
I mean, I think the kind of it's probably to do with the different classes of people that work for these places. Like people that work for Starbucks are going to be people that are like, they're at university or they've graduated from university or they're going to go to university and are in a culture where these ideas about now, like they'll all know what like socialism is, or they're thinking of what socialism is, and they'll know about Bernie and all this kind of stuff. And these ideas of unionization and socialism and whatever are being normalized among kind of like a educated, not necessarily middle class, because lots of people go to university these days, but an educated population, which it's just not really the case for kind of the non-college educated population in the US. I think there's a lot more work to do there, convincing people of even that unionization is like a good thing.
That's a very good answer, Stefan. The actual body politic that make up the labor at Starbucks being more proximate to ideological leftism because of the age makeup and cohort compared to Amazon. There might be older workers, more steep. I think concentration of capital might have something to do with it too, with Starbucks in terms of nature of work. I think it has something to do with it well in terms of like focusing a kind of sense of subservience at Amazon based on the kind of way I've seen that work is organized. It kind of has, I think it probably has like a kind of psychic toll on the laborer in a way that Starbucks is kind of is different. So those things might be significant as well. But I also think that there was a lot more effort to create subterfuge in the Amazon and the Amazon campaign. And also, I think Starbucks also likes to project a certain type of image of crunchy munchy Birkenstockism a little bit, if you will. And it really would be very bad for the brand if this Seattle-based kind of, vibe was like,
Yeah,
oh
they
my
try to
God.
fucking smash them.
Yeah, they try to smash them. So I think those are all of those. I guess we could call those atmospherics, maybe. Those atmospherics played a role, but those. I'm really fascinated by your
But they are
response.
trying that though, aren't they? Like one of the links I asked Jason to embed is like a link for a GoFundMe page for Memphis Starbucks. So I definitely think maybe there's a different ceiling or different base where they begin. So maybe Starbucks was maneuvering a little bit more before, but I don't think it's going to be like. I mean, they did try to fire those employees at Starbucks in Memphis. And that's the thing with. I guess you're referencing the Bessemer, Alabama one. Like the region is different. Like the South is hard to organize because it's they're way more anti-union in a way, and the
Historically, the South has
historically
been extremely anti-union.
right. So I think that's a thing, and I think because from my experiences of like I went to one area that we were trying to help, one store, and it didn't seem like one person professorial whatever PMC thing. I don't think that was the issue. It was more like I think some people are also just getting fed up in different ways. It's hitting it differently in some sense because I don't know if it's even apt to compare because Bessemer, the situation looks like there was a lot more subterfuge too that I think now Starbucks might do. So we might have to wait and see what actually happens too. There could be a revving up of like,
Bessemer weren't those guys kind of some of the higher paid people? I mean, we have to keep in mind that Amazon in certain places, especially in the South, where you have a minimum wage of probably $7 and change. If you're making $19 an hour, regardless of peeing in bottles, you're doing better. I worked in the South in 2007 on oil rigs, and I started at $7 an hour, and I worked 84 hours to 96 hours a week.
Jason, you have a lot of fascination with urine today. What's up with that? Peeing in bottles, peeing in showers.
Man, fucking hell. What year was this?
2007. I ended up.
You went on an oil rig in 2007 for $7 an hour.
Overtime.
I mean, was that like were you working most of those work hours?
Yeah, I could.
Like doing shit.
Yeah, doing shit. Yeah.
Man, you should have been in Starbucks.
Yeah. But I think
I got overtime after 40 hours, and I got 40 hours in like the second and a half day. Yeah. So then you're at time and a half, which was like $10 and change. Then I got a raise of $10 because I got a new position. But but in the South, I can actually say in the South, if you're making $19 an hour and if they are going to pay you overtime, you're not really going to push back as hard. And especially if people are frightening you with union dues and you live in a region where it's not unionized. The Gulf of Mexico, not union. So oil field.
Yeah, Amazon's paid good here too compared to warehouses otherwise.
I think something that Pascal had mentioned of the type of work that goes on, like working service industry, there's time availability for you to have multiple conversations with your coworkers. Even at the busiest times, you can still have conversations. The Amazon warehouses and the way that Amazon makes their warehouses and the amount of work they do, the time constraints, you got to get so many packages shipped and go, or you're fired. It doesn't actually allow for that organizing, to happen like really even on the ground, It's like everybody individually thinking this shit fucking sucks, but never having the conversation, Yeah,
I was going to say the same thing that in Starbucks, you've just always got time, like the workers, to hang out and talk to each other.
Yeah. I worked service industry for years, and even at the busiest times, I'm still like bartending, even at the busiest times, height of the night, me and my coworkers are still talking shit. Oh, hey, did you see that person? What's that goofy shirt? Oh, there's a hot girl over in that spot. Whoa, look, there's about to fart. We can still have conversations and we're moving. Amazon, like warehouses, that doesn't happen. And, that's where you got people who are just like, I'm just going to keep my head down and keep getting this paycheck.
And also we have to add the, third party also puts a big, monkey wrench into a lot of this stuff. Back to the Gulf of Mexico, there's so many third parties that are involved in any oil rig operation. It's the drilling company and the fracking company are not the same. I worked for a third party as the quote unquote catering cleaning staff. Pretty much any job that happens to drill a hole out, there's several different third parties that come in, so that does also make it harder to organize.
I do want to say though, with the Starbucks thing, something that was really dope. Recently, they got a roastery, and one of the manufacturing teams that have joined the organizing effort or unionization effort. And this is like, I think that's where like I think is like a lot of importance to be put on what this whole drive and what's happening is because it's working its way up the supply chain at this point, and it's only one roastery, one manufacturing team, but hopefully that moves forward. And yeah, roastery is not just a factory where people make fun of each other, right? It's not where the jokes come in, the joke factory, but that's where it's like, okay, can we start talking about the shipping, teamsters, longshoremen? Can we then get to farmers? And if that point, it's like you go from, hey, we're demanding wages to, hey, we could probably just control this thing if we wanted to.
I just wanted to say the 1905 Russian Revolution was a direct consequence of the humiliating loss to Japan. Like how that's like a major factor. Like I don't know how you can make that comparison. The George Floyd, there was like a major social distrust of the government because they lost to the Japanese.
And I'm sorry, Winston chewed on the left of Bernie sign too much.
Rip.
He literally just chewed it up.
Well, hey guys, we've been going on for 2 hours, and
This is a cool show, man. I really enjoyed this.
I want to first of all thank Stefan for staying up late, hanging out with us. Well, I know it's late. It's Saturday. It's Saturday.
Rolex.
Oh my
7 p.m.
You got the pimp in 1970s watch.
Puffy. God damn.
You call yourself a communist.
How are you going to be a fucking leftist? What? I'm sorry, I can't see. Oh, sorry. The shine. Oh, what is it? Oh,
do you see the bling on my bling?
Oh, my nigga's shining. Oh, shit.
Blink, blink, my dudes.
Do you see the bling on my bling, mate?
Wales, the Syria, bitch. Oh, the shine. Oh, the shine. Oh, look at this hair, luxurious bitches.
Oh shit! Oh shit!
I see.
Sudip, can we have you back sometime?
Yeah, definitely. I just want to say this is like my first time doing something like, so I was really nervous, but I really appreciate all the questions and everything because, I was like,
you weren't cringe.
Okay, that's great. Like, I definitely don't want to be remembered for that. I just want to say really quickly about the different groups because Grassroots Asians Rising. It's a coalition of groups, Asian American groups on the left, two of which I really like, Cav and Drum, who do amazing work in New York City. I really hope that people click on that and donate to them. There's our, Central Jersey Mutual Aid. I don't think I have to say much. The people there, I know they're amazing. They are, I think right now, actually, in a corner of New Brunswick, providing groceries and stuff to people who need it. So please donate to that. And there's a couple of other links, Memphis Laborers and New Labor. I know we talk a lot about labor organizing, and they organize workers in New Brunswick and other areas in New Jersey, and many of whom are Black and brown workers, many of whom are immigrant workers, and who really need, they're doing the work themselves, but every extra kind of funding is like amazing. So I'm just saying, again, there are things happening, but it goes up. It is, again, how well we want to actually fight back includes solidarity in this sense too. But I just want to say thank you so much for having me here. It's like, yeah, I've been watching you guys show and stuff, so really cool.
No, thank you for hitting me up. There was some things you had asked me to mention before, and I totally forgot. And I was like, you know what? Just fucking come on the show. That way, it'll be easier for me to remember.
Yeah.
And I do think you have some important things to say. Thank you for sending me that essay. Even if you didn't mention Pascal's very comfortable ass, I still found a lot of value in the essay. So.
He cited me by name.
I know. I said even if he didn't mention you, I still found the essay very valuable. Like I don't want Sudip to think that he's only here because he mentioned you. That's how
Yeah,
you
he dropped. He's next thing you know, he's like, as Noam Chomsky said.
That's my plan the entire time. I was like, Pascal.
As Hassan Piker said.
Yeah.
This was a fun show,
so
man.
you said that you didn't really know enough about it, but I was thinking we definitely should do a show on This is Revolution about the CPIM, Communist Party of Indian Marxists.
Yeah, definitely.
I think people in the chat will know that most will know that they have run Kerala, this Indian state, for the past 40 years. But what less people know is that they used to run West Bengal for decades and decades of continuous rule, but then they lost the election. And after they lost the election, they've faded. They've kept losing, they've kept going down. Yeah. And, kind of what can we learn from CPIM, from their successes and their failures?
Yeah.
Western Bengal.
I'm more than happy to come on again. I'm just being honest. Like, I don't know super much other than like what I'm reading. But if you want to talk about internationalism or like that kind of politics, I'm fine with that too. I'm not going to pretend I know a lot. Like sometimes it's like people
speaking of internationalism, I wondered too of like what I think actually there'd be a lot of weight and positivity, or like just good things coming from trying to organize immigrant labor, especially within agriculture within the United States. But I honestly, I mean, like, yeah, I think that'd be like a very, very, a key step as like the left like builds out, but because that's, like immigration and just where your food comes from, like those are big things.
And did you like the picture that I used of you? Because that was the funniest picture on your social media. You holding that chair at a picture place.
When I saw that, I was wondering.
That's why he looked like he about to fuck somebody up with a smile.
Jason
with a chair.
Jason always uses pictures for the guests like they're walking into a club. I don't know
why. Oh my god! No, appreciate. I don't know what to say. I just saw that. I was like thinking, like, all right, that's fair enough.
This is a pre-COVID pic. He's like, that was when barber shops were open.
He's got all these of him as a baby and his dad like playing with them. I was this close to putting that shit up. Stefan is the smartest cat because Stefan has curated his social media to be like, all you get is press shots, bitch. Look at the shine.
Bling, bling.
Did we ever show the actual Thor photo? Like me with the hammer on screen?
You with the sledgehammer? I think we got that on.
We had found it.
On the first episode.
I think I found it, but it was after the stream ended.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Bling, mate.
No, I'm not a Gemini. I am a Leo.
That's my father's sign.
Oh, dang.
Are me and your dad like a day apart? When was his birthday?
My father's August 17th.
Yo, 2 days apart. That's what it was. Yeah, August 19th.
I'm a Gemini. What does that mean?
I have a lot of traumatic.
It means you don't have to fucking shine like Stefan got.
Bling, bling, mate.
Aquarius.
Bling, bling, mate. Bling, bling, mate.
It's like a...
Bling, mate.
Oh, shit. Hold on. We got to share the screen before we go. We got to share the screen. We got to lead you guys go out with this because Stefan just sent me the shine shot.
Yeah.
Look at the shine, bitch.
Sudip, if you didn't know, you're on with the leftist superhero, Thor Rivera.
No, I'm aware. That's when I saw him jump in, I was like a little bit like, what am I gonna add to this? But
look at that shit right there. Look at shine, bitch. These are the only that Stefan knows. Stefan's like, if I'm going on one of these shows, you bitches ain't gonna get my high school picture. You're not gonna get me in the 8th grade with my teeth looking fucked up. No.
The only reason that's true is because my old Facebook account was deleted on orders of the Turkish state because I wished happy birthday to Abdullah Öcalan. And so the only photos I have now are like post that whole thing.
Wow.
But you know what? Facebook deleted my profile as well. And yeah, I lost all these pictures of my kids that I put up on social media. I don't have the phones
Now you're
anymore.
gonna get tears, man. You're gonna start crying now, man.
Sucks.
Oh.
Yeah. But Stefan and his well curated. I'm jealous, Stefan.
How
that you have
tall are you, Stefan?
social media presence.
Oh, I'm really fucking short. I don't know if any people on the internet know that, but I'm tiny.
Word.
No,
Well,
keep
I didn't-
lying.
I didn't-
Nobody's gonna meet you in real life. Keep lying. He's 6'8".
I was like, because I didn't think so. Because like some of the pictures where you're sitting down, I'm thinking like, all right, normal. But like this, I was like, is Stefan a short king?
Oh, is that like an enormous rifle? That's not an AK-47. That's like a Dragunov. No, I never.
Like, wait a minute.
I'm over here wearing Oshkosh fucking fatigues.
Oshkosh does have a military part of the program. Just saying.
Bling bling, mates. Bling bling.
Hey, but he'll I'll fuck you up with the hammer. I'll fuck you up with the hammer. What is it? The hammer.
Damn.
Shit.
Yeah.
All right, we've fucked around for far too long. Sudip, thank you so much.
For sure.
Wherever you guys are watching the show, there are links in the description to Sudip's essay, the new one on Counterpunch, Striving for Solidarity, as well as all of the organizations that he is affiliated with. Pascal, do you have anything to say on the way out? Oh, Tuesday or Monday, we'll be doing our sports show. Tuesday, we have a show with Jackie Lukeman where we'll be looking at the revolutionary capacity of music.
Is that Tuesday or Thursday?
That's Tuesday. Thursday is we're going to talk about.
We're going to talk about the biracials owning slaves. Yeah.
So this month for us is how soon can Jason and Pascal get canceled? So thank you, Sudip.
Pascal's about to be on the one drop rule in reverse.
Sudip, thank you for joining us on one of the final episodes of This Is Revolution. Before we make a hard right pivot and become Fox News pundits.
Yes, yes.
Kuba's
Ching, ching.
So thank you guys, and we